Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. The Prince. By Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in the 1600s, a guide to running a country. Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a parody while he was banished from Italy because he was accused of being anti-Lorenzo de' Medici, the ruler of the Florentine state at the time. Machiavelli authored the book with a wry nod to de' Medici, and he intended it to serve as a primer for aspiring princes, or monarch. The book's tone is icy and abrasive. Controlling and dictatorial duties are described as being the responsibility of a prince here. Sadly, the satirical undertones were lost in translation for a long time. In the past, and even now, several of the world's most prominent leaders have referred to the prince as a mentor. Several dictators, including Hitler, Stalin, and Lenin, claim to have based their reigns of terror on the book. A worldwide phenomenon. Despite this, the prince continues to be the basis for numerous economic and political tactics to this day. The prelude to The Prince is a letter to Lorenzo de' Medici, Lord of Florence from 1516 to 1519, which serves as the book's introduction. To avoid confusion, the Lorenzo the Magnificent in this dedication is not to be confused with Lorenzo's great-grandfather, the legendary Lorenzo who controlled Florence in the late 15th century. Machiavelli simply uses the word magnificent to describe Lorenzo in order to please him. A year after being exiled from Florence, Machiavelli appealed to the new ruler, Lorenzo II de' Medici, for a reprieve from his sentence. Italian city-states could be united into a strong nation-state by Lorenzo, a man he saw as the future of Italy's political future, and he presented his solution in The Prince as a gift to him. As a result, neither Lorenzo nor the Italians were able or willing to implement the prince's system of national unity against foreign invaders. However, politicians like Cardinal Richelieu of France, Frederick the Great of Prussia, Otto von Bismarck of Germany, Mussolini, who wrote his PhD on The Prince, Lenin, Hitler, and Stalin used Machiavelli's theories in their own political strategies later in history. Monarchies is the title of the book's first section. Different kinds of states, and the different ways to get them is the title of the first chapter. Machiavelli summarizes the many forms of states in this work. According to him, republics and monarchies are the two main types of government. A republic is a form of government in which the citizens are the ultimate authority, and they are represented by a body that wields power. A monarchy is a form of governance in which the highest authority is vested in a single person, known as a king or a prince. The term son of the king has a different meaning in this instance. Machiavelli's The Prince, on the other hand, is a misogynistic work that focuses solely on men. In order to portray the book's misogyny and remain loyal to the summary, all references to man and he have been kept. It is only in The Prince that Machiavelli discusses monarchy rather than republics. To begin, he discusses the many types of monarchs and how they came to be. As long as a prince doesn't act aggressively toward anyone in order to achieve power, he thinks that ruling an inherited principality is the easiest way for a prince to exercise authority. Because he provides such a high level of safety for his people, they remain loyal to him. It's easier for the public to adapt to policy changes because the government has been run by a single family for so long. New monarchies, on the other hand, are fraught with difficulties. Multiple monarchy, in which a prince expands his sphere of influence, are also known as mixed monarchies. In some cases, the people in the new territory may have rejected their former prince and fought back against the invaders. Remember that the people who recently welcomed you may soon try to topple you if you anger them, especially if you recently seized their land. This makes it easier to maintain control over a new territory that shares the prince's faith, language and culture. People will not revolt against the prince if he is certain that the old ruling family has died out and is careful not to make significant changes to laws and taxes. If the new territory has a different language or customs from the prince's, the people are less likely to be loyal to the prince's rule. This might be accomplished by having the prince reside in a captured area, as the Turks did when they invaded Greece in 1453. So that if any issues emerge, the prince will be able to address them quickly. It is either the prince lives in the annexed area and maintains power or the city is destroyed if the area was once a republic with some freedom. As a result, the populace will resent the prince and rise up in rebellion. As the Romans did, the sovereign of an annexed region should establish colonies there for the benefit of his own people. In order to connect the prince to the new land, the settlers will be needed. It is also cheaper to maintain colonies than a permanent force in the newly conquered country. Wisdom and prudence dictate that a prudent prince protects his weaker neighbors while aggressively weakening his more powerful neighbors, so they will not threaten him. He must keep out invading forces and remove any opponents that grow powerful enough to bring him down. It is easy for a prince to maintain authority over new territory he has conquered via combat rather than by chance. Moses, Cyrus, Romulus, and Theseus are some of Machiavelli's favorite historical princes. As a result, certain rulers are able to acquire other kingdoms by chance or with the support of strong private individuals. By purchasing it or receiving it as a gift or favor, they acquire territory. It's more difficult to keep these in place because the prince often lacks prior leadership experience and is forced to rely on something or someone else for his position of authority. Cesare Borgia, 1476–1507, of Romagna, in northeastern Italy, is an example of a ruler who won his kingdom via the efforts of others. Pope Alexander VI, Pope from 1492 to 1503, Borgia's paternal grandfather, amassed a vast domain for his son. Borgia stood up for it, and Machiavelli was impressed by his tactics because of his father's backing. It was under Borgia's leadership that the region of Romagna was brought to a state of peace and order, despite the fact that he did so through the employment of harsh and cruel methods. He also began forming partnerships with other states. His rise to power was short-lived after his father's death and the discovery by Borgia that the new pope, Julius II, was anti-Borgia. Because their activities are seen as providing the kingdom with security and stability, certain cruel and inhumane princes, according to Machiavelli, hold power. Also, Machiavelli points out that it's better for a prince to be cruel all at once, so that the prince's subjects will soon forget the cruelties. However, any benefits that the prince grants to his people should be offered gradually so that the prince appears to be kind at all times. In some cases, a man becomes a prince due to the desire of his fellow citizens to see him rule. Machiavelli refers to this as a civic principality and adds that this prince must be both wise and lucky. It's common knowledge that every city has an aristocracy, and anyone who helps the nobility will be surrounded by individuals who think they are equal to him and believe he owes them something. In order for a wise prince to have greater influence over his subjects, he will make the nobles reliant on him. If he is fair and doesn't harm anyone, the prince who leads because the people want him to will have fewer troubles. Even if he got to power by aiding the aristocracy, the prince should treat the people decently because he must live among them. Also, the prince must make sure his subjects have a constant demand for his presence on earth. The people will remain loyal to the prince if they believe that he is necessary for their safety and well-being. In particular, if the people formerly controlled themselves and now found their new government to be one of absolute rule, this is true. Rebellious people are less probable if they believe the prince is the only one who can protect them from harm. In any case, a king or queen must have a well-equipped army and not be despised to rule effectively. According to Machiavelli, the Roman Catholic Church wields considerable power over ecclesiastical principalities, chapter 11. Despite the fact that these regions may be difficult to conquer, he claims that the Church can easily manage them. As a result of the Church's old religious customs, the principalities may be held, no matter how their rulers behave and live, i.e. potential invaders are unwilling to be aggressive against God's kingdoms. After it comes military power, the book's second section. In chapter 12, Machiavelli argues that having a well-trained army is the surest method for a state to maintain its dominance. As a result, the prince is compelled to devote all of his attention to war, and he regulates it more strictly than any other subject. Even in times of peace, he should learn about war by looking to the past and following in the footsteps of famous warriors. Paid troops and soldiers from other regions are not loyal to the prince, according to Machiavelli. Soldiers who are natives of the principality are the strongest in an army. In the section on armies and their composition, Machiavelli elaborates on this point. A prince's army can be made up of mercenaries, auxiliary troops, or even soldiers belonging to the state. Mercenaries, he says, will defend you from disaster only as long as nobody threatens you. In peace you are at their mercy, and in a conflict at the mercy of your adversaries. Machiavelli attributed Italy's army's vulnerability on mercenaries since they only serve for money. Sparta, Rome, and modern Switzerland are all democracies with significant armies made up of citizens, while the Carthaginians had mercenary-led forces that nearly overthrew their leaders. If a prince requests their assistance, foreign armies known as auxiliary forces will step in to assist. Aside from mercenaries, Machiavelli also regarded them useless. Auxiliaries come to you as a compact body, all educated to obey somebody else, he writes. Both of these warriors can be found in the mixed army created by Machiavelli, which should be avoided at all costs. Princely qualities, A Prince's Roadmap to Success is the third chapter in the book. According to Machiavelli, it is admirable for a prince to be generous, kind, trustworthy, courageous and intelligent. Nevertheless, most people lack these characteristics. The prince, at the absolute least, must avoid any character flaws that could lead to a scandal or bring him down. If a vice or immoral behavior has the potential to benefit the state, the ruler should not be concerned about the ensuing scandals. It's important for the prince not to be seen as a liberal who spends too much money. As long as he has enough money, he will be able to appropriately protect the state. As long as he doesn't have to raise taxes on the populace, he should be able to defend himself. By contrast, Machiavelli says, the prince should be perceived as miserly and spend his money wisely rather than to rely on his subjects by taxing them excessively at will. Though it would be ideal for a prince to be both feared and loved, if he had to pick, he would prefer to be feared rather than adored. As far as Machiavelli is concerned, most people are untrustworthy, thus they are more loyal to those they fear than those they love. The prince, on the other hand, must exercise caution should he become despised, as this would lead to a coup. Knowing that his deception will benefit the state, the wise ruler decides not to follow his promises. However, he must constantly appear to be generous, kind, and devout. It is mandatory for a prince to disarm his new citizens and transfer over military command to soldiers from his former realm when he annexes a territory. While fortifications might be important in protecting the state, a wise ruler also learns to make friends with those who were once his adversaries. The prince must have a team of trusted counselors around him. He needs to keep away from charlatans and rely on a few men who can speak openly to him without fear of repercussions. The prince should only accept advice from people he asks for in order to avoid being taken advantage of. Providing unsolicited advice is never acceptable. Free liberty to speak the truth should only be granted to the most intelligent members of a wise prince's council. The prince has the right and responsibility to learn from others' experiences and ideas by asking questions, soliciting advice, and listening carefully to what they have to say. After making his own judgments, he must next follow through. In order to provide objective feedback on the prince's actions and decisions, his advisors must be the best. The prince should respect and protect the counselor, keeping him submissive and cognizant of his duty to the state and the prince, and the counselor should think only of the best interests of the state and the prince. Titled Problems in 16th Century Italy, this is the concluding section. As Machiavelli himself admits in chapter 24, he wrote The Prince for rulers who have no prior expertise in courtly affairs. If a new prince acts wisely, his actions will have an instant impact on the citizens. Not because of terrible luck, but because the princes in Italy have not done correctly. They didn't have their own armies, they didn't get along with their people, and they didn't control the nobles. There are many people who believe that the outcomes of political events are dictated by forces outside of their control, such as God or random chance, fortune. According to Machiavelli, only about half of all human occurrences are determined by chance, and that chance may be reduced to the bare minimum. As long as people are set in their ways, a prince who wants to be successful must learn to be adaptable and dealing with his subjects' differing viewpoints. In the event that he is caught off guard, he could be utterly destroyed. For fortune is a woman, and it is necessary, if you intend to dominate her, to conquer her by force, writes Machiavelli, for rush into action rather than be careful. For his part, the Prince of Naples concludes, it's time for a new prince. Someone who is capable of uniting the numerous Italian states into a single entity capable of repelling foreign attacks. In order to heal and unite Italy, he asks the Medici family for help. With Lorenzo II, the new Medici prince, the Italian people can once again be proud to be the heirs of a glorious Roman Empire by building an effective national army. Italian Renaissance philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli, 1469–1499, was born in Florence. He was the son of a lawyer who studied extensively in Latin and Italian classics as a youth. When Lorenzo de' Medici, or Lorenzo the Magnificent, ruled the Florentine state, Machiavelli was a young man. It was an exhilarating, but also tumultuous, period in history. Machiavelli was named secretary of the Second Chancery of the Republic of Florence in 1498, 4 years after Charles VIII of France invaded Italy and the expulsion of the Medici. He was sent on 24 diplomatic trips by the administration of Florence to meet with the leaders of other Italian cities, the King of France, and the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian during his 14 years in service. Florence's survival at this time of city-state intrigue depended on these missions, which provided him the opportunity to observe other governments and rulers. Cesare Borgia, (1476 to 1507), an Italian cardinal and military leader, was a major inspiration for Machiavelli's The Prince because of his skillful use of deceit, cruelty, and self-reliance, as well as his use of native troops. Frightened Florentines asked the Medici family to return after the French army invaded Italy again in 1512. The French were beaten at Ravenna, but the Spanish troops reached Florence, overthrew the Republic, and restored the Medici dynasty to power. He was imprisoned and later banished like many other anti-Medici liberals involved with the Republic's government. His most famous works, The Prince, 1513, and The Discourses, 1520, were written while he was living in his home in San Casciano, where he retired, 1524. At the age of 58, Machiavelli died. He was laid to rest in the Church of Santa Croce in Florence. The legacy of his works and name continues to this day. In the commercial and political world, the term Machiavellian has come to signify the practice of manipulating others by a deception and dishonesty, according to his satirical novel The Prince. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.